Between 1861 and 1865, the United States of America was engaged in a brutal civil war that would ultimately leave an estimated 750,000 people dead. At the start of the conflict, the Confederate Army won key battles, but the Union Army would recover and beat back the Southern soldiers, ultimately winning the war. Here are 10 of the key battles of the American Civil War. The Battle of Fort Sumter marked the start of the American Civil War. Fort Sumter, located in Charleston, South Carolina, was under the charge of Union Major Robert Anderson when the state seceded from the Union in 1860. On April 9, 1861, Confederate President Jefferson Davis ordered General P.G.T. Beauregard to attack Fort Sumter. On April 12, Beauregard troops opened fire, marking the start of the Civil War. Outnumbered and with supplies that would not last 3 days, Anderson surrendered the next day. Union General Irving McDowell marched his troops from Washington, D.C. towards the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia, on July 21, 1861, intent on bringing a swift end to the war. However, his soldiers were not yet trained, resulting in an unorganized and messy battle when they met the Confederate troops near Manassas, Virginia. The larger Union forces, though inexperienced, were initially able to force a Confederate retreat, but reinforcements arrived from the Southern Army, and General Stonewall Jackson launched a successful counterattack, leading to a Confederate victory in what is considered the first major battle of the war. The Union Army, under the command of Ulysses S. Grant, moved deep into the Tennessee, along the west banks of the Tennessee River. On the morning of April 6, 1862, the Confederate Army launched a surprise attack in hopes of defeating Grant's army before more reinforcements arrived, initially driving them back over 2 miles. However, the Union Army was able to stabilize due to the brave defense of the Hornet's Nest. Divisions under the command of Benjamin Prentiss and William H.L. Wallace, and when Union aid arrived in the evening, a counterattack was launched, with the Union emerging victorious. General Robert E. Lee had been installed as the leader of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia in June of 1862, and his immediate goal was to reach 2 northern states, Pennsylvania and Maryland, to survey railway routes to Washington, D.C. Union soldiers under the leadership of General George McClellan discovered these plans and were able to attack Lee along Antietam Creek, Maryland. A powerful, brutal battle ensued, and the next day both sides were too battered to continue fighting. On the 19th, the Confederates retreated from the battlefield, technically giving the Union a win in the single bloodiest day of fighting, with 22,717 combined casualties. Facing a Union army of 132,000 men under the command of General Joseph Hooker, Robert E. Lee chose to divide his army on the battlefield in Virginia, despite already having half as many troops. On May 1st, Lee ordered Stonewall Jackson to lead a flanking march, which would surprise Hooker and force them into a defensive position. The following day, he divided his army again, with Jackson leading 28,000 troops on a march against Hooker's weaker right flank, destroying half of Hooker's line. Intense fighting continued until May 6th, when Hooker retreated, facing 17,000 casualties to Lee's 12,800 casualties. Though this battle is remembered as a great victory for the Confederate Army, the leadership of Stonewall Jackson was lost as he died from wounds sustained by friendly fire. Lasting 6 weeks, the Confederate Army of Mississippi was under siege along the Mississippi River by Ulysses S. Grant and the Union Army of Tennessee. Grant surrounded the Southern Army, outnumbering them 2-1. Several attempts to overtake the Confederate Army were met with heavy casualties, so on May 25, 1863, Grant decided to attack the city. Ultimately, the Southern Army surrendered on July 4th. This battle is marked as one of 2 critical turning points in the Civil War, as the Union Army was able to interrupt critical Confederate supply lines in Vicksburg. Under the command of newly appointed General George Meade, The Union Army met Lee's Confederate Army of Northern Virginia from the 1st to the 3rd of July, 1863, in the rural town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Lee wanted to get the Union Army out of the battle-worn Virginia, draw troops away from Vicksburg, and gain recognition of the Confederacy from Britain and France. However, after 3 days of fighting, Lee's troops failed to break the Union line and suffered great casualties, making this the bloodiest battle in U.S. history. It is considered a key turning point in the American Civil War. In early September 1863, the Union Army had taken over nearby Chattanooga, Tennessee, a key railroad center. Determined to regain control, Confederate Commander Braxton Bragg met William Rosecrans' Union Army at Chickamauga Creek, with the bulk of the fighting taking place on the 19th of September. Initially, the Confederates could not break the northern line. However, on the morning of the 20th, Rosecrans was convinced there was a gap in his line and moved troops. There was not. As a result, an actual gap was created, allowing for a direct Confederate assault. The Union troops scrambled, withdrawing to Chattanooga by nightfall. The Battle of Chickamauga resulted in the second most casualties in the war after Gettysburg. The Battle of Atlanta occurred just outside of the city limits on the 22nd of July, 1864. Union soldiers led by William Sherman attacked Confederate soldiers under the command of John Bell Hood, resulting in a Union victory. This victory allowed Sherman to continue his siege upon the city of Atlanta, which lasted the whole month of August. On September 1st, the city was evacuated, and Sherman's forces destroyed most of the infrastructure and buildings. The Union troops would continue through Georgia in what is known as Sherman's March to the Sea, demolishing everything in their path to disrupt the Southern economy. Lincoln's re-election effort was boosted by this victory, as it was seen to cripple the Confederacy and bring Lincoln closer to ending the war. On April 8, 1865, the battle-worn Confederate Army of Northern Virginia was met by Union soldiers in Appomattox County, Virginia, where supply trains awaited the Southern Army. Under the leadership of Philip Sheridan, Union soldiers were able to quickly disperse the Confederate artillery and gain control of the supplies and rations. Lee hoped to retreat to Lynchburg, Virginia, where he could await his infantry. Instead, his lines of retreat were blocked by Union soldiers, so Lee attempted to attack rather than surrender. On April 9, 1865, early fighting ensued, and Union infantry arrived. Lee surrendered, triggering a wave of surrenders across the Confederacy and making this the last major battle of the American Civil War.